sexual wellness and femtech businesses in Asia. Today we have with us Peter Macquart-Moulin. I hope I pronounced that right. He's the founder and CEO of Yesmom in Thailand. Thank you so much for being here with us, Peter. How are you?
No, great, and thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be on.
And are you calling us from Thailand itself?
Yeah, I'm in Bangkok. We're Bangkok based.
Okay.
So we're Singapore and Bangkok and Thailand company.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Because I heard about another similar startup from Singapore that graduated from the Antler Startup Bootcamp.
Oh yeah, Fig.
Yes, Fig, and they also do at-home fertility testing.
That's right. Yeah, no, I know. I've spoken to Maria and Pierre. So
cool.
I'm familiar with what they're doing. But we're incorporated in Singapore, and we're mostly operational in Thailand, and it's where we started 4 years ago. So we're very much a Thai. We have a much stronger Thai presence.
So tell us how you came to be in Thailand. You've told me that you are American, French, had a startup in Spain, now a startup in Bangkok, Thailand. How did that happen?
Yeah. So it's kind of wild. I'd always loved Southeast Asia. I'd lived in China for a number of years, and I would travel often to Singapore and to Thailand. And I think when I went back to Europe, I was in the UK for a number of years, and I completed an MBA. Started my first company in doing video crafting e-learning business. And when that failed, I kind of had the opportunity to just figure out what I was going to do, and it kind of was a blank slate. So I always wanted to get back to Southeast Asia. Around that time, I had met a lot of people in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur and Thailand that were in the tech space or in the venture capital space, and I just came here just to really kind of dig a little deeper and see what the scene was like. And really, very fortunately, I met a few people who were starting a startup studio here. So it was Gear Wenzel, Jace McDonald, and Stein Jacob Boy, who was president of Lazada Group at the time. And so that kind of got me started here. I was an entrepreneur in residence, so it was great. It's a dream for a founder to, before you even have an idea, you're already funded anyway. So, and you already have that support. So that's how I ended up staying here. My wife and I had come here, not really sure if how long we'd be able to stay, but things worked out very quickly.
And this was 4 years ago.
Yeah, this was 5 years ago, actually.
5 years ago, way before even Femtech was popular, I guess, anyway.
I mean,
right?
Yeah. So the idea and really the funding that I had was to do something in parenting space. It was a very, very broad mandate to look at something in the parenting space. And so I spent a few months interviewing hundreds and hundreds of women, doctors, a lot of different people in the health space, with trying to understand kind of the journey that women go through with their maternity and early parenthood, or early childhood development. But one thing that became very obvious to me was that kind of the one factor that linked everyone's experience, and something that transcended socioeconomic and educational boundaries was the lack of access to information about their own bodies, and I really started to look much deeper into women's health in particular, and preconception, so fertility, but also a lot of STDs or pelvic conditions, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I went back to Gear and Stein and Jace and said, hey, you know what? I think we should do something in women's health. And I think 5 years ago, I mean, it wasn't even like just doing something in healthcare that wasn't a kind of a ripoff of like WebMD, was already kind of something novel. And, you know, we were like, we're going to do some AI stuff in health. And So they thought that was pretty cool, and it's really amazing on them because again, this was before femtech was coined. Really, everyone in the region was telling me, particularly investors, saying like, health is one thing, but women's health, that's way too niche.
Yeah, that wasn't even a thing,
and then once
really.
wasn't a thing, and you're like, well, it's 50% of the population, it's 80% of the healthcare decision and spending. So it's not niche at all. But then once you get into, okay, well, we're going to talk about sexual and reproductive health within women's health.
Yeah.
That's when they just kind of lost it.
But just like, let's
I
go
had
for the most niche category that no one can find.
Yeah. But so, it worked out. We really wanted to find a way to really kind of have an educational tool, really. So there was really kind of no monetization idea about it. It was very much just trying to solve a problem, and then like, let's see where we can go from there. And I had a female co-founder that joined me at the time. And we had a lot of Thai women as part of the team as well to really kind of help better articulate what the problem was and develop something that was going to be, that Thai women would find receptive, would be receptive to.
So what was the first iteration of Yesmom? And how has it
so
changed
we looked
to now?
so we did we started off as a symptom checker, and that kind of evolved into a ovulation and fertility app, because we found that we were developing a lot of algorithms that would look at symptomatic data that was reported to us over several weeks or several months, to be able to have a kind of some conclusion about a particular medical condition, for example. So, for example, endometriosis, we're looking at certain patterns, certain symptoms that maybe in isolation aren't really thought much of. You start to see that, okay, well, painful intercourse or painful menstruations, or other symptoms they may have over time could be an indication of endometriosis, which is something that is quite most of the time undiagnosed.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, it was really those who continued to give us that symptom reports their symptoms to us were either women that were just very keen on tracking their periods, so particularly women who had irregular periods, or women that were trying to conceive naturally. So about 70% of those that downloaded the app were trying to conceive. But then, in our first month that we launched, we had 70,000 downloads just in Thailand. So it really kind of showed that, hey, yeah, there really is a demand for this. There really is an appetite for this kind of tool and this kind of information. And it was really, I think, one of the only fertility trackers at the time that was in Thai language as well. So yeah. So we've kind of grown from there. We've now developed fertility hormone testing capabilities. So very much following the same mission to empower women with the tools and information to have more agency over their bodies and their reproductive lives. Yeah. We've kind of tried to go a step further and say, well, so many women who spoke to us had told us, well, I wish I'd known about egg freezing, or I wish I'd known about PCOS much sooner, not when I'm 38 years old, or not when I'm at a time where my options are maybe a little bit limited and I have to go see a fertility specialist. So we wanted to look at how could we take this further, and how could we be much more proactive about these sorts of things, rather than letting someone know that they have a problem. So the hormone tests was born out of that necessity that we saw in the market.
And what hormones in particular are you testing for using the kit? Is that a blood test that you do at home?
Yeah, so it's a blood test. I'm at the office. I could maybe even pull one up, but yeah. Yes, nothing like a good demo. Kit, you can take it home. So we have a little device that collects about 2 drops of blood on a little Q-tip,
Yeah.
just a teeny 4 little dots. So
Yes.
those are about half a drop on each tip, and you can take it at home. It takes about 30 seconds to collect the blood and from a little finger prick, and then a courier will pick it up from your home, and we look at up to 8 hormones based on that little sample. So it's the 8 fertility hormones that most fertility clinics
Right.
would be looking at for kind of a in-depth assessment.
And
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, so yeah, and I think the key for us is not only to to give a lab report. So we that is very unintelligible. So what does it mean to have a high AMH or low testosterone or whatnot, particularly based on someone's age and medical history. So we generate 6 to 8 reports that really dive into what those levels can mean. And what does it mean to have a normal level even? So, what does that mean for someone's reproductive health if they're 20 years old or if they're 40 years old? What sort of decisions can they make in their lives based on that information? If they have markers for PCOS, or if they have low ovarian reserve, or if they have the possibility of having an earlier menopause onset than the average. And it's really about putting that power into someone's hands. And it's been amazing. So I was just explaining today our first cusp. We started in India a year ago.
Okay.
Our very first person who bought the test was a 20-year-old woman. So it's not someone who's suffering from, who's been trying to get pregnant. She was 20 years old, single, and she was worried about her irregular periods and wanted to manage that, and wanted to know what options she had later on, and if she would maybe in the future have a fertility issue.
Yeah, that's amazing, because when I speak to founders of such businesses, like the response that they always get is that the younger generation seem to be more. I mean, it might be fair to say that they're more hungry for this information, but I guess it's because they have a wider access to this sort of alternative information that I guess a lot of us never received before.
I think that's really true. Someone who's in their kind of mid 30s in this part of the world is used to having less choice, less access to information, not just in terms of health, but in their lives in general. And I think people in their early 30s and younger, we're used to being able to shop around, get information on just about everything, and so they're much more kind of a jump to, I should have all these options in my health and conveniences and information about my body. It's a much more natural. They don't even have to think about it, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, so you might not be able to tell, but I'm also in my mid-30s, and I went for a fertility test at the clinic. I mean, so in Singapore, you can go if you're single, you just cannot pursue any IVF options, for example. And, they do the usual test. And I mean, I had no idea what those tests meant. It was just a piece of paper given to you with some numbers and some lines and a graph, and they're like, okay, cool, normal, everything's good. You're like, but and then what? So I guess my question to you is, I mean, for sure you do a lot of, you do the personalized data reports, but after that, what's the aftercare? Like, can they still go to you for recommendations on specialists if they need to?
So on the point that on your experience, I mean, that was part of the reason we started the app. Is I sent some of my colleagues to talk to different doctors just to better understand the process. And it wasn't about fertility at the time. This was just asking about different birth control. And it was very much that, like, oh, just take the pill. And not giving them, not talking about the different options or what fit maybe their health or lifestyle or personal choices. And I think a lot, we have a lot of doctors that support us, So it's not like, not knocking the profession. It's a lot of times they don't have the time to
Yeah.
to
To do
spend
a
with patients to
one-on-one.
educate them to
Yeah.
one-on-one. So it's very much that frustration of like, yeah, everything's normal, or it's a little high, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, what does normal mean, and what does that actually mean for these different things? So that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to fill that gap, and not at all cut in between the relationship between a patient or consumer and her doctor, but really to help her have a much more meaningful conversation with her medical professional, medical provider, and allow her to engage a lot more and have a lot more agency on the decisions about her health. So yeah, so to answer your question, we do then we can connect them through telemedicine to a specialist, particularly if there's an issue, or we give obviously the lab report that they can take to their usual doctor if there's an issue and they want to follow up on that.
Have
But
you been?
we don't actually have their own telemedicine. We have telemedicine partners for that.
Yeah. And have you seen an, I guess, uptick in the reception of the tests throughout the years?
Yes, I think there's a lot more. Um, it, it's still early in this market, and there is a lot of education that needs to be done,
Yeah.
and I think companies like Prenetics have kind of laid the foundation, very much like 23andMe did in the United States.
Yeah.
I think companies like Everlywell and Modern Fertility, Let's Get Checked in the US, are in a way kind of piggybacking on 10 years of 23andMe educating consumers that, hey, you can get health insights from something you can take at home, right?
Yeah.
And that's a little bit what we see here. If someone is familiar with the idea of doing a DNA test from a cheek swab, that's much, the concept of taking blood from a finger is not a huge jump. So yeah, we're seeing, I mean, COVID has affected us in various ways, but we do see it growing, and I think we're right at the beginning of this kind of product in this kind of market.
Are there other products like yours in the femtech industry in Thailand that cater to women's
Uh,
health?
Not like ours, no. We have, there's a few interesting companies here that are developing blood tests, not home tests, but more for looking at exomes in blood tests to predict the preterm births. So a company called Milu Labs is based here, partly here in China, I believe. So we do have a couple of people that are looking at these things, but nothing quite like ours that's looking at home blood tests, looking at hormones. In terms of Femtech, I'd say it's much less developed than Singapore. I mean, I think in the
Yeah, I
last
mean,
year, the amount of companies
Singapore
of
really
I'm
blew up
speaking to Singapore,
in the
it's
last year.
amazing. I'm so jealous. This is the year that I can't travel, right? And I can't come and can meet you all. I think Thailand is just beginning. I think in the last year, I know of 3 companies looking at periods, everything from providing cups, which is
Yes.
still a new concept here. There's 2 companies looking at pads, which is still much more common. So the organic pads and tampons as well.
I
So
actually
that's
spoke to a really lovely young lady from Thailand as well, just recently, I think a month ago. And her
okay.
brand is Cups of Joy, and she does menstrual cups.
I've heard of that. Yeah, exactly. That's actually who I was referring to. Yeah, I'd heard of
Yeah,
that
and
brand.
she also
Yeah.
said that the brand, like her brand is new and it's kind of just picking up, I guess, in Thailand. So she's really quite
Yeah.
first mover there.
I think it's still something that's generally something that people are beginning to talk about, and it's something it's been like a lot of Asia. It's been something a little bit taboo, embarrassing. Everything from
Yeah.
a period to sexual pleasure is not something that's really talked about. And I mean, when you talk about sexual pleasure, sex toys are illegal in Thailand still. So it's still there's still a lot of taboo around
You know,
these issues.
I think so. In Singapore, obviously, it's a South Asian country, and we are also conservative. But then I think in Thailand, there is the added layer of a large rural population. How do
Right.
you see your product reaching that rural population? I don't know if that's a part of the plan or.
Yeah, it is, and well, in a way, people in rural areas have less options. So the fact that we can deliver this in rural areas, the fact our blood test doesn't have to be in Bangkok, right? So anywhere you
Mhm.
could be in a very remote area of Thailand, and we can give it to you. It'll take a day to get to you and a day to get back. That's fine. So in a way, we are solving the issue of remote access. We're giving a lot more health care options to remote patients, and I think it works really well with telemedicine. I think and this has been a really good year for digital health and telemedicine because of COVID,
Yeah.
and that's also why we're seeing this being very much kind of aligned and working in partnership in concert with various telemedicine providers. Um, so no, I think this is a very good thing for people who typically didn't have as much access or choice in their healthcare.
And I think you also mentioned to me that you are able to launch a few more, two or three more test panels.
Yeah, so we're
Are they also
looking
going to
at
be fertility or?
so we have two that are hormone related. So we're looking at a perimenopause and postmenopause test.
Oh,
Similar hormones, but different panels.
that would be really
And
interesting.
really looking at that. Yeah. So women in their from their mid 40s to early 50s, and really trying to understand again perimenopause and postmenopause. But then I think we want to go. I think one thing is not to get stuck in like fertility and women's health, and
Yeah.
femtech isn't just about well, women want to get pregnant, and that's the difference, right? We want to have a very wide option for general health. So we're looking at a heart health test right now that looks at a number of inflammation markers and cholesterol. Um, those are probably the ones that'll come out a little sooner. We're looking at different like food sensitivities, allergies, and the like as well. So providing a much broader set of health products that aren't specifically limited to fertility.
And how has your own learning experience been with Yesmom?
With Yesmom,
Yeah.
in terms of women's health and
In
understanding.
terms of women's health, were you from the medical
No,
background?
no, so I wasn't at all in the medical background. I think I was I was a risk consultant, strategic risk consultant, looking at particularly corruption issues. So I was a anti-corruption specialist, then I did an MBA. In fact, I did the same MBA that Pierre from FIG did.
Oh.
And it's a small world. And then yeah, so I mean, I've always cared about women's issues in general, and it was just sort of it was kind of very fortunate that these events would bring me to that. So I've learned a lot more about women's health issues in particular, and health in general. And it's kind of something funny I was thinking about. I was telling my colleague the other day that I've spent years talking about health and empowering women with these tools about their health. But because I've been an entrepreneur, I'm at the office, I'm eating like nuts and stuff, and realized that I've probably neglected my own health as well. So I'll be keen to also look beyond just women's health in the future.
There is actually a company in the UK that focuses on sperm health because I'm I have a friend there who's doing work for them, but it's also because in getting pregnant, I think a lot of the focus is kind of on the woman, like how to improve their fertility, what to eat, what to do,
Yeah.
and then people kind of forget that like the man also is part of the equation.
Yeah, and so that was one of the biggest issues that we had in the very early days. So we were dealing with a lot of mental health problems. So a lot of women were coming to us just to have a place to grieve when they had a miscarriage. And then they had a lot of also just to talk about kind of issues they had at home. So they, they're having difficulties conceiving. They want to do something about it. Their partner doesn't, because there's nothing wrong with the guy, and it's all on them. So actually, just in a way, we're just telling women a lot, like, actually, this is maybe how you can have a conversation with your partner that doesn't make him feel threatened or vulnerable, inadequate in some way, and to kind of put this as on a more equal footing. Yeah. But no, it's true. I mean, that's women are more proactive about it, but men are particularly sensitive to the idea that there's anything wrong with them.
Yeah, and I think that's also maybe an underserved area, perhaps.
Yeah, it certainly is.
You mentioned that so now you're in Thailand, you guys are in India, you're expanding to the rest of Southeast Asia as well?
Yes. So this year we'll be in Singapore, and hopefully within the next 3 months we'll be in Singapore and Malaysia. And beyond that, we're looking at Indonesia, Hong Kong, and there's a couple other markets that we have to make a call on. But yeah, we'll be expanding quite rapidly, and in those markets we'll be coming with the additional tests that I mentioned as well.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been in Thailand for a while now, in this industry for a while. What do you see about the general level of women's wellness?
I still think it's after 5 years, it's still an underserved market, if you will, or need. I think women's it's just now starting to come on people's radar, and I think women, and they're able to kind of talk about it more and talk about these issues, and kind of demand a little bit more attention to their needs, and not kind of. I mean, a lot of healthcare is developed for men and based on men, right? Medicine is based on men.
Research uses male.
Exactly, and I think that's only now coming into the conversation, and I think hopefully we've played some role in it by kind of, at least with our content and starting a conversation around that. Yeah. So I think that's really important. I'm very proud of that fact, and I think we're just at the very beginning where women's health needs are going to be much more addressed, and there'll be much more demand from women as consumers to have something that is developed and designed for them, and have much more options and much more say in their health decisions.
Cool. This is maybe for myself, but I was wondering, are people surprised when they see that it's a man behind Yesmom? Do they expect it to be a woman?
Well, so I'm just the CEO. I'm not the man behind the brand. So my co-founder that I brought in very early on, she's a she, and so it was her. She's an amazing product person. Mm-hmm. I had a team, majority female team. So I wouldn't say that there's a man behind the brand in the company, and that the product is very much designed and developed with a lot of women's input. So yeah, I'm just the business guy, I guess you could say. But honestly, no. I think we never developed the brand around any of the founders. So yeah. I think most people wouldn't in Thailand are familiar with Yesmom as, at least from a fertility app and a blog. They wouldn't necessarily know that there's a foreign male that's running the company. But also, I think if I talk to, for example, investors, I'm just happy that they understand women's health at this point. I mean, it's really been a big change in the last year. Yep. Like I said, 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, yep. saying we were doing something in women's health was too niche. And today we get phone calls regularly from people who have investors who have a remit to invest in not only like women's health, but like they use terms like femtech and fertility health. And I'm
yeah, the new industries.
yeah, where were you 3 years, 4 years ago? So no, that I'm just happy the conversation has I think we were just too early, but no, it's
I
amazing
don't
to see
think
this.
being early is necessarily a bad thing. You know, you've had
No,
time
and like I
to,
said, I think if we've played a role at all in educating Thai women about their bodies and being more open about having conversations about anything from an STD to their periods, then I'm happy. I'm really satisfied.
I mean, you've helped that 20-year-old in India, if one.
Yeah, if one. Yeah, no, and we've had we've had about 350,000 people use our app just in Thailand.
Yeah.
And tens of thousands of people have messaged us telling us that they conceived because of our tools, or that
wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing, and that input, or again, tens of thousands of people just write us personal messages like, I learned so much using your app about my body. I downloaded it just to track my period, but I learned about all these things. I'm like, yeah, this is why I get up every morning. This is why I do it. That's awesome. That kind of feedback is the reason I do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've honestly come to the end of my questions. I've learned a lot about the fertility testing. I mean, I only wish that when I went for the first test, something like this was much more readily available. So, I mean, thank you to people like you, companies like Yesmom, that's really helping raise awareness and increase accessibility to education and information for women.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I think that I wish I had known about XYZ is again why we kind of developed that. So glad that it's working out.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. We'll see you again soon. Bye.
All right. Bye.